Yeah, so I think procrastination is not doing what you know you need to do to move yourself forwards, is my would be my definition of it. And there are various reasons that people procrastinate, and I think it depends on the task. So I think there's a fear of uncertainty. If I do this thing, if I start this business, how might my life change? And that might be that your life changes for the better, and you've no
Mm.
idea how you're going to deal with that. And the fear of uncertainty really is our subconscious going, do you know what? We don't actually know what's coming when we go down this path, and we're going to be out of the comfort zone, and we don't know what that looks like. So do you know what? Let's go watch Netflix, because then we know we stay in the comfort zone because we know the comfort zone. It might be
Yes.
rubbish in the comfort zone, but we know it. The other one, like we've said, is the fear of failure. And that could be you've tried to do something new before, it didn't work. So you're sitting with your back of your in the back of your mind thinking, well, I've tried something before, it didn't work. So I'm too scared to try it again.
Welcome to Risk and Rise, the podcast where we explore the journey of overcoming the fear of failure, embracing risk, and achieving success in entrepreneurship, creativity, and personal growth. I'm your host, Talana Simpson, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Together, we'll discover the strategies, insights, and shifts in our thinking and attitudes that are needed to turn setbacks into stepping stones and transform fear into fuel for success. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's episode of Risk and Rise. Today we are risking and rising with Emma O'Brien. She is a no-nonsense coach as well as a successful entrepreneur in terms of her photography businesses. I really wanted to speak to her because I think she can bring us an element of personal development, but also obviously her experiences of failing as an entrepreneur. Enjoy the show. No way. Welcome, Emma. What comes to mind when you hear the term risk and rise?
Well, hi, it's lovely to be here with you. So I think it's about what immediately springs to mind is what do you need to kind of take a risk on doing in order to be able to grow or up level or uplift or get yourself to the next level? No risk, no reward, right?
Yes, very much. So tell us also a bit about your story, so your background, and just briefly, to get a bit of context in that. I know you're an award-winning dog photographer, and you are a wonderful coach now, so a no-nonsense coach, you call yourself. Um, so just give us a bit of a background of what brought you to here today, but also if there's any opportunity to highlight a failure along the way so that we can unpack
Yes.
it.
Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur for the past 20 years. I started my photography business in 2004. So I would have been 23 when I did that. God, that's terrifying. And I think the beauty of starting a business when you're in your early 20s is you actually don't pay attention to what could go wrong. I just went, I'm going to be a photographer, off I go. And that's what I did. And I think if we look at any of the weddings I shot at that time, because I started off doing wedding photography because it's kind of, I had a bit of an in with somebody I'd been doing some second shooting for. And that was kind of the in to photography for me. And I just thought, this looks easy, I can do it. So I think if we looked at any of those initial weddings, we probably would see that I wasn't doing it very effectively, but people paid me and I had a business and off I went. And that was kind of my approach to it. I don't think it occurred to me that it could fail because I didn't give that to myself as an option. And to fast forward, I'm going to take us back there just now, but to fast forward to where I am now, I started my coaching business in 2019 and I started mentoring other photographers. And then I've since trained to do an ICF accredited coaching qualification because I think it's important as coaches that we're qualified. And I've tried to maintain that mindset of this cannot fail, which in my early 40s is not quite as easy to tap because there's more riding on it, really. There's more riders, the expenses are higher, there's more riding on it. But I went into it with, I can do this. It was an attitude of, I can do this. Now, that cocky little attitude soon got put into check when I had my very first failure, which I want to share with you, because it's interesting. In prepping for this, you asked me to, where had you failed in business? And I was thinking about it and I thought, you know what? There is this one time I'm going to share with you where I failed. Everything else has been a learning experience. I wouldn't count anything else in my business that hasn't worked first time or as I thought it was going to. I wouldn't call it a failure. I'd look at it as information. That is how I view when things don't go according to plan. Otherwise, you get tripped up all the time. Don't get me wrong. I've
Yes.
sat in a heap on the floor in tears about things. I've been really frustrated, but I've also looked at it and thought, okay, this isn't working this way. What can I do differently? It's just feedback. So the big failure I had was, I think, probably in 2006. So the business had been going a couple of years, but, I'm still getting off the ground. And back in the day, then you might recall when we used external hard drives, they were a lot bigger than they are now. They plugged into the power source, they plugged into a computer, they had a lot more moving parts. And I had uploaded a whole wedding that I'd shot onto this hard drive. And we all know where this story's about to go. And
Yes.
because I made a lot of assumptions about technology, I had then wiped the memory cards, shot over them to reuse them. And one day, whilst I was sitting at my desk, the hard drive fell off the desk. And
Oh,
yep, oh, and I lost half of that wedding. So that was a very big wake up call for me. So not only was there a big learning there about backing up, not taking technology for granted, there was also a big learning in, and this is what you and I talked about when you guested on my podcast, was there was also an opportunity to learn how to communicate some very difficult information to another person.
yes.
So, because this was a very awkward conversation. In awkward conversations in my life, this is probably, aside from asking my first husband for a divorce, this is the second most awkward and horrendous conversation that I've ever had to have with somebody. So that is really the only thing I would say that's a failure that I couldn't recover from. I couldn't do anything about. You can't pivot from that. That is a fail.
Yeah, like losing the actual data, the
Yep.
photos.
Yep.
So besides then the awkward conversation, as you call it, what helped you move through that?
Well, yeah, I think there was a big lesson in backing up, which I then started to do. And that's something I've done, I am a paranoid backer upper now. My iMac failed last year. I use a big desktop iMac for my photography editing. Wouldn't boot up last year. Took it to the iStore, and the only way they could fix it was to wipe it entirely.
Ooh.
And yeah, exactly. Oof, that's how most people would go, oh no. But I'd done a backup and it wasn't a completely current backup. So I lost a little bit of design work I'd done, but I didn't lose anyone's photos because I'd backed it up and I thought, oh, I had to think about what have I got to redo here? And I probably had to redo about 4 or 5 hours worth of work. That was it. Because there's a whole backup here and everything else is backed up in 3 other places. So it wasn't a complete disaster, but I see this with creative people, with a lot of photographers who make an assumption like I did back in the day. Everything will just work. Hard drives get stolen, they get dropped, they fail, computers fail, and you can't, so there's a big lesson. And going to the conversation that I had to have, it was a big lesson in the value of communicating with people rather than hiding away when something has gone wrong, is to actually just be honest with people. So when the hard drive hit the deck and I sent it off and I tried to get stuff on it, and I couldn't get it to work, so I had to send it away to somebody. I phoned the bride and I said, listen, I'm really sorry, but I've had a slight disaster here. Luckily, it was a second wedding, thank goodness. And I said to her, it's gone. I'm going to try and recover everything, but I don't know if we're going to get it back. And I kept her in the loop with what was going on. So when I phoned her to say I can't get your pictures back, she said, well, I kind of expected that was what was going to happen. So I'm not happy about it, but we can't change it. So I then said to her, what can I do to kind of make up for this? So she asked me to, they had a little one, so they were having a christening. So amazingly, they said to me, can you come and shoot the christening? I'm thinking it's a miracle anyone asked me to go and shoot anything again. But so I was able to kind of make it right. So it
Yes.
was so many lessons in there. And I think that is how I have always approached things in business is there is huge value in communicating with people. A lot of the disruptions you have, the upsets we have in life is because we just don't communicate honestly with each other in business, in life. And if you can learn that skill, and it's something you coach your clients around,
Yeah.
you're it's a really valuable skill to have because what people really don't like a lot of the time, I think, is being ignored or being lied to. And sometimes telling the truth can be difficult. And it was really not a good, it's not something I wanted to tell somebody the only day that, your wedding day that you can't do again. But it would have been far worse if I'd have left it for 3 months, lied, and then said, oh, by the way, I don't have pictures for you. So I think it's weighing up the kind of short-term discomfort with long-term, your long-term success, if you like, or long-term results.
Yes. And as you started speaking about this, you were saying that when you've gone into business, you've actually said to yourself, well, your very first business in your 20s, it didn't even enter your mind about failing. But
Yep.
now later with your coaching practice, you've gone in saying, you said something about this cannot fail. So I
Mm.
just wanted to check whether, so yes, you've learned that everything is that you see it as feedback, information that helps
Mm.
you, improve things,
Yeah.
have three forms of backups and all that. But what is that this cannot fail? Because that's what is that kind of failure that that cannot happen?
I think it's kind of, I know other people are doing it successfully, so I can do it successfully. And I won't allow or entertain the possibility that it could fail. Does that make sense? So it's not allowing those feelings of doubt to filter in. I think when you're starting a business, it's difficult because you've got no past kind of, well, I've got a past track record of having two very successful photography businesses. I had one I started in the UK, and then when I moved to South Africa, I started a photography business. I've been successful twice in setting businesses up, so I know I can do it. Coaching is as you know, it's a very different business model to sell than something tangible. You're selling the invisible to people. So it is a different kind of animal, and I have found it's a challenge to do it. You've got to get your messaging right, you've got to get your marketing right. There's a lot to it because it's not like with my dog photography. I can show you a picture I've taken of a dog and say, would you like one just like this? And people can go, yeah, and they know what they're getting. Coaching is it's an investment in yourself, but you don't quite know what's going to come out of it. So that has been the challenge for me of getting that right and pitching that right, and understanding what I'm offering and who I'm offering it to. But I don't allow the possibility that this might not work because it's hard to come in and take over. And I think that's the trouble with people when they start businesses. They expect results to come immediately and they don't. And that's
Mhm.
very frustrating to sit with that. You almost have to white knuckle that bit of a beginning bit of a business where you're doing a lot of marketing, you're putting a lot out, you're investing a lot into it, and there's not much feedback coming in.
Yeah.
And not much feedback is also feedback. So it's starting to have a look at, okay, so I did this kind of marketing campaign, didn't really land. What do I need to do to tweak? And I think it's being able to view it as with curiosity, and it's trial and error. I mean, even when you have an established business, you can be doing the same thing for 3 years and it works brilliantly. And then all of a sudden it can stop working.
Yes.
Just as frustrating.
Yes. No, it's just interesting because there's obviously in the language that you used an idea of a failure, like you used another term you used was it won't work. Whereas you have the mindset that it's if others have done it, it's possible. I've just got to work out how. I've just got to, and everything little step is just getting me closer to.
Yep.
And when something doesn't work, it's just because I'm learning to tweak it. But I think that, and you brought in self-doubt. It's almost like we have this idea that we use the term fail, that the business could fail. I don't know what that actually means, because if everything is a learning, how can the business ever fail?
Yeah.
Versus doubting ourselves that it may do this, whatever inverted commas failure is. Do you know what I'm trying to get at here? So it's interesting that you brought it's more, I think our fear of this word failure is more our doubt in ourselves. Would you say that?
I think it can be. I mean, look, a business failure to me would be you start a business with a goal of earning money and it doesn't earn money. That's a failed business. It's not a business if it's not earning any money. But when it's a business model that other people are doing and doing it successfully, we know it's a business model that can work. So if you're doing it and it's not working, it's something you are doing or not doing. So that's where you've got to dig in and say, okay, what am I missing here? And that's where, for me, if I get to that point, and I got to that point with my photography business in 2016, not that it was, and again, you're right, and it's how you apply the word failure. Really, it's just, for me, it's something not working anymore or not working the way you want it to, if we define it like that. In 2016, I was so busy with my photography business. I was working 7 days a week, probably doing 10 to 12 photo shoots a week. I was exhausted and I was broke. So effectively, I had a business that was failing because I had nothing to show for all the hard work and I was burnt out. So for me, that was the point at which I went, okay, clearly I'm missing something here. I need some help. And I hired a business coach. That's why people like you and I exist, because having somebody else to be able to objectively look at what you are doing and to go, I mean, I remember this business coach said to me, well, you need to look at your pricing because that's clearly completely wrong. And you need to stop doing everything yourself. I mean, I was driving prints to people. I mean, I don't actually know how I managed it, to be quite honest with you, at all. If I look at it now, I think about it and it's exhausting. So as it was, the business wasn't working, and we had to make changes to it and streamline it to make it continue to work and generate income. So I think it's reframing that word failure, because I think there's such a stigma attached to it. Nobody really wants to admit to failing, in inverted commas, because there's a shame attached to it. And we think other people are going to judge us. I think often we judge ourselves the hardest when things don't go right. But it's being able to take the emotion out of it and look at it objectively and say, okay, why didn't this work? Or why isn't it working? What do I need to do differently? What do I need to learn that I don't know? Because we don't know what we don't know. And if you're missing a piece of information that you need, then you need to go find it. But I think it's being able to be objective about it. And often when you're running your own business, I think it's very hard to be objective about what's going on a lot of the time.
Yeah, especially if you're so stuck in it. So that's why you need to have some mechanism to step out of it and look back, the working in versus working on the business. Yeah. So what about taking risks? I talk about risk fitness, which is our the fitness we have in terms of handling something risky, and something that's risky, there's a fear attached to it because it could go wrong. It could
Mm-hmm.
not work. It could damage us or hurt us in some way,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally or physically in that.
Mm.
So what's your fitness like, your risk fitness?
Well, I think probably from the conversation so far, we can see that I'm pretty risk fit. I think the older I've got, the more I look at it and think, what's the potential reward here? And what's the timeline for that potential reward? I wouldn't, um, if we talk about, when you're sitting with a financial advisor, they'll ask you about your risk profile for investing money. I would not say I would go for a high risk investment.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just, I wouldn't. Um, but in terms of starting new things, I tend to kind of go with what do I want to be doing? What's fulfilling for me? And if it means changing one thing in order to go after something else, and if I think it's going to be worth it, I'll do it. I mean, take where I'm at right now. I'm in the process of transitioning out of a very busy full-time photography business, which I've pretty much pulled out the handbrake on, to going into coaching full-time. It's a risk. I've got something that I know without having to pay for any marketing generates me income, but I also don't want to be working weekends anymore. It's very labor intensive, and I actually want to be doing something else. So I've taken a risk in investing a lot of money into a coaching qualification and investing a lot of my own money into getting a new career off the ground. So I would always have a look at, what's the long-term reward for it? I think often nothing really comes that quickly necessarily. So it's also how long are you prepared to, like we've talked about already, how long are you prepared to ride out the period of time where it's a lot of energy outpouring and not much coming back in. So yeah, I don't have a problem taking risks.
Yeah, sounds like it. Right. So you've had experience then in starting businesses and running them in the UK as well as in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always interested to hear in terms of the greater context, climate of entrepreneurship, how you found those experiences. Because in South Africa, we need more people to be taking the risk of starting a business, even though
Yeah.
it's not. Well, no, let me just leave that question. It's more about want people to start businesses, to hopefully grow them, to grow jobs and stimulate the economy in that. But there seems to be so many problems and hiccups and mindset challenges in South Africa. So just from your experience, having lived now in both countries and that, what can you share about the differences or the similarities? How have you found it?
Yeah, so I think South Africa, there is a terrible scarcity mindset. I think that's part of the problem here, but I think that's worldwide. I don't think it's unique to here. If you shuffle around in Facebook groups, you'll see people in the US, the people in the UK complaining about fuel prices, food prices, cost of living. Wherever you are, people are going to whinge. I think the thing is, for being a successful entrepreneur, is you have to step out of that collective negative mindset. You have to not allow yourself to be sucked into that vortex. And that isn't about being Pollyanna about it. I think we do, to an extent, you create your own reality, but also if there's an economic downturn and you've got a big-ish business, it's going to be a problem. But for most solopreneurs and small businesses who need a handful of clients to make a profit, you've got to step out of that collective mindset. You have to. And the thing is with that, I mean, whether people agree with me or not, and maybe it's sticking my head in the sand, I don't watch the news. I don't read newspapers. I don't listen to the radio. I am not interested in having all of that external negativity swirling around in my brain. I can do nothing about it. But all it does is it takes up mental energy. So I think you've got to be mindful of who you surround yourself with and making sure you're in a community of people who are uplifting and who can share success stories. If I take the photography industry, because it's the thing I'm most familiar with, I know lots of photographers who are barely scraping by. And yet I do very well with my photography business. So is it true that nobody's spending money on things? No.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. So you've got to be careful of your thinking, of what's kind of and what's infiltrating. It's vital to be managing that.
Yeah. Very much. And then remembering that you're the person who controls your mindset.
Yep.
Yeah. So instead of having a scarcity mindset, it sounds like it's more of an abundance and being
Mm,
selective of as you're saying, what you allow in and who you surround yourself with.
yeah.
And because that has a big impact. So the other side of this question is us just as society. How do
Mm,
we, or how could we help people who actually are willing to take that step, that leap, and start a business and go through the ups and downs and the failures and as we calling the mistakes? And how can we support them? How can we encourage more people who to actually take that step?
Look, I think a starting point is this conversation we're having now is you need to be listening. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to be listening to other entrepreneurs, not listening to your friends and family who aren't entrepreneurs and tell you it's not possible. You can't do it. It's This is a starting point, is looking at who has done what I would like to do, because success always leaves clues. So you can start to have a look at what are people who I admire who are doing a thing that I want to do or the same thing that I do, what have they done? And anybody you listen to, podcasts you listen to, we'll be having conversations like we're having. It's about being able to get back up one more time when you fall down, because entrepreneurship is not a smooth path. It's not an easy path. Let's not sugarcoat it. It is one of the most difficult choices you could make when it comes to earning a living, but it is one of the most rewarding if you want to be in control of your time and your income. So I think you've got to be tenacious about it. You've got to be persistent about it. A lot of successful people you'll see are not necessarily talented per se, in that they're perfect at what they do. They just keep showing up, and they keep
Yeah.
showing up with determination to do it.
Okay, and you said that from the entrepreneur's perspective to not listen to friends and family. So part of that
Mm-hmm.
question was if we put ourselves into the friends and families' shoes, what
Mm-hmm.
can friends and family do to help an entrepreneur? What is it? Because I think they need a mind shift
Yes.
change. What's it? A mind change as
Yeah,
much
yeah,
as the entrepreneur does.
yeah,
So what's your
yeah.
message to them, friends and family?
Can I be no nonsense about it? My message is shut up.
Yes.
Unless you've got something positive to say, shut up and support, unless somebody is going to swallow your life savings to start a business that no one's ever done before, just be supportive. How rather than saying, "Oh, should you do that in this economy, blah blah blah." How can I support you? How can I help you? And it might be helping is just don't make that comment.
Yeah.
And because I think and I understand often it comes from a place of love. We don't want to see people we love, we don't want to see them fail. We don't want to see them go through a disappointment. But there's nothing more disappointing than settling for something you don't really want because you're not brave enough
Yeah.
to take a risk to go after what you might want and what might work.
Yeah, and what came to mind is the example you gave there would be one of those awkward, courageous conversations, I call them, is to maybe
Yes.
if you're concerned that the person you're with is going to
put all your life savings into a business that you can't see as being viable. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe asking them rather the question, how could we support you do this, but without it affecting our savings?
Yeah.
So, it's to have more of the solution focused questions. So
Yes.
you're not discouraging them from working on their idea, you're
Mm-hmm.
encouraging them, but putting up boundaries to protect, everyone
Yeah.
who could be involved.
Yeah.
So yeah. I also really wanted to speak to you in particular because you have one of your areas of speciality is around procrastination. And I think that is part, what we're talking about. In a way, we procrastinate in starting our business idea
Mm-hmm.
we come up with all these reasons. So I thought it'd be very interesting to hear from you with your expertise around procrastination, like how it relates to us fearing failure, how it relates to failure, how it stops us from trying and learning from our mistakes. So it's almost like maybe I should have started with what for you is procrastination, and then we can unpack.
Yeah, so I think procrastination is not doing what you know you need to do to move yourself forwards would be my definition of it. And there are various reasons that people procrastinate, and I think it depends on the task. And I'll share those with you, and then you can see what
Yes.
pops out for you. So I think there's a fear of uncertainty. If I do this thing, if I start this business, how might my life change? And that might be that your life changes for the better, and you've no
Mm.
idea how you're going to deal with that, because that might mean, let's take, for example, you start a business and let's say you do really well. And all of these, and this is all unconscious, this is the problem. Until you become aware of it, it's running the show. So this is the part of the work I do with clients, is really digging into what's going on under the surface that's stopping you. Is if I quadrupled my income tomorrow, what are people going to think of me? Are people going to start taking advantage of me? What about the tax? All of this stuff is going to be, how am I going to manage that money? All of these things are going to be going on. And the fear of uncertainty really is our subconscious going, do you know what? We don't actually know what's coming when we go down this path, and we're going to be out of the comfort zone, and we don't know what that looks like. So do you know what? Let's go watch Netflix, because then we know we stay in the comfort zone, because we know the comfort zone. It might be
Yes.
rubbish in the comfort zone, but we know it. The other one, like we've said, is the fear of failure. And that could be you've tried to do something new before, it didn't work. So you're sitting with in the back of your mind thinking, well, I've tried something before, it didn't work, so I'm too scared to try it again. There's a fear of judgment from other people. If I do this thing, what are people going to think of me? What are people going to say about me? I think a lot of putting yourself out there in business means becoming very visible. Are people going to troll me online? Are people going to be mean to me? How am I going to deal with that? Am I going to upset people? There's the fear of perhaps not knowing how to do something. And I think this, for me, would come up as technical stuff. I'm not terribly technical. So if I'm worried about the fact that I don't really know how to set up an automation, might procrastinate around that, because I might think it could be too complicated, it's going to take me too long, so I won't do it. And the last one really is actually not wanting to do the task that you know you need to do. That can be a big thing that causes procrastination. Fundamentally, you don't want to do the thing you think you need to do. And for the last two, there's an easy solution for those. If there's a task that you know you're not doing because you really don't want to do it, outsource it. Get somebody else to do it. Throw some money at that problem. And the same with a fear of not knowing what to do, or not knowing if you're skilled enough. Again, you can throw some money at that problem. Get somebody else to do it for you, or invest in a course where you can learn how to do it. I have a great virtual assistant who does all of my back-end stuff in MailChimp and lead pages for my mailers and sales pages. I've got no idea how to work that, but my time is not a good use of my time to figure it out. And if I had to figure it out, I'd never do it. So sometimes just investing in the right help can solve the procrastination problem.
Absolutely. And that's very much around the if you have to do it, but don't want to. And they said the technical know-how. Let's
Hmm.
go back to that fear of failure. And I think
Mm.
that for me, when we talk about this fear, it's behind it is that fear of judgment, the
Yeah.
fear of uncertainty, and the fear of, yeah, see, I still don't even know what the failure is. I have such a strong that it's feedback
Mm.
information. I always find it
Mm.
difficult to
Mm.
go there.
Mm.
How can we tackle those? How can we tackle, I mean, is it different strategies or is it just about the awareness? Is it,
I think if I take, for example, I have a bit of an aversion to doing a group coaching program. I've done one before and I had a handful of people in it. So did it fail? No. But I think I was hoping it would have 20 or 30 people and it had 8 people. So not, it was fine, but I wouldn't, I think my fear is what if I put a load of effort into creating a group coaching program and I had 8 people in it again? Because it makes me look like I'm not very successful, is one thing. A group coaching program with 8 people, we know what group coaching is like. Not everyone's going to show up. And actually, fundamentally, a group coaching program, the success of it hinges on everyone coming and kind of journeying together. So I think for me, that's a big handbrake. And reflecting on it, if I look at it, why did I not have enough people in it? Because my audience isn't big enough. So I'm in a phase at the moment of audience building. So I have strategies in place to audience build. And I've, learned valuable information from a group coaching program with 8 people. I learned information about what's a good time frame for a class, not 2 hours. How do you put everybody together? How do you manage it? So again, coming back to, did it fail? No, but I am a little bit put off from doing it again right now. But I know what I need to have in place to launch one in the future should I want to. So it's coming back to kind of working backwards. Okay, so I got this result. It wasn't quite the result I wanted. What do I need to change in order to get the result I do want? And what do I need to do? What action do I need to take to move myself there?
so there's not really procrastination then in that example, because I think you've the procrastination of not attempting another group coaching program has led you to look at the learnings, what
Mm,
didn't work last time, and now you've changed your whole strategy. It sounds like you've got a new strategy. So you're not really procrastinating anymore. It's just delaying until the right time because it's
mm.
part of your strategy. How can
Yeah,
we get more comfortable with the unknown? Because
yeah.
that's in terms of someone who's never done entrepreneurship. They're in the corporate world and they've got this urge and now they're going to step out. It is totally unknown for them. They've
Mm-hmm,
been listening to my podcast. They know it's
mm-hmm,
difficult.
mm-hmm.
How do we manage that uncertainty that leads us to procrastinate? Because I think
Yeah.
that's what's stopping people.
Yeah, I think the first thing is you need to make sure you've got as much information as possible available to you. So if it's an information gap, make sure you've got enough information. That doesn't mean that you can procrastinate by information gathering forevermore. Okay, so not giving you permission to keep procrastinating if you're a researcher. I think that's the one thing. And I think, unfortunately, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to make peace with the fact that fear will always be riding in the car with you. You might get to the point where you can pop it in the boot. It will always be there because there's always uncertainty with being an entrepreneur. And until you've got an established business, you don't necessarily always know where the next client is coming from. I guess that's part of the thrill, really. If you can, it's a wild ride. So I think you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, knowing that that fear never goes away, knowing that it will always be there, but it's about managing it and not being consumed by it. And you can also start to look, is it fear or is it a bit of excitement that's kind of showing up as fear? And we know, and we've touched on this, if there are other people successfully doing what it is you want to be doing, you can know that that's a business model that can work for you. It's just you've got to figure out the ways to do it. And I think also, at the risk of sounding like it's a sales pitch, is hire a coach, hire someone who can take that journey with you, who has gone through it, who has done it, who can support you and guide you and help you and hold you accountable and support you when you go through the inevitable meltdowns that come with running your own business. It's a hard decision when you decide to be an entrepreneur. And there's help out there. So you don't have to muddle through it on your own. I did that for a long time until I figured out that there's something called a coach out there. And I'm like, oh God, I wish I knew about this sooner. Because it will just sometimes someone can say one thing to you and the penny drops and you think, oh my God, this is why I've been stuck at the same level for 5 years, because I didn't have this one piece of information. So
Yeah.
don't tough it out alone either.
Yeah, and if it's not a coach, there's always, you can find mentors. There's so
Yep.
many support groups for
Yep.
entrepreneurs nowadays, and it
Yep.
is amazing how you can just through sharing more about your journey, and that doesn't mean giving away trade secrets. It's just
Correct.
sharing the challenges you're facing.
Mm-hmm.
There's someone who's faced something similar, and when
Mm-hmm.
they mention it, as you say, the penny drops and your next step becomes, clear to you.
Yep.
So great. So, is there anything else you want to say around failure? Otherwise, I have a few rapid fire questions as we come to the end. Maybe just also ask how people can get hold of you, and anything else you
Yeah.
want to add.
So I think one thing I'll add, because we've talked a lot about failure here, is sometimes we forget how brilliant we are because we're so focused on what we haven't done, haven't achieved, and get in and I think can get stuck in a space of striving all the time. Is I would invite you, if you're sitting at the moment listening to this thinking, I'm not, if you're stuck and things aren't moving along, can you make a list of your 10 best successes over the course of your life? 10 times you've overcome something that you've been afraid of, but you've managed to do it anyway. Make a list of those things and start to have a look at, how did I achieve that? What was the inner resource that I had to dig into? What external resources did I have to dig into? Because if you've overcome it before, you can overcome it again. And I
Yeah.
think it's just so important to be reminded of your own capabilities. So those are my words of wisdom for folks. If you want to find me, you can connect with me on my website, which is emmaobriencoach.com. And then I'm also on Instagram at emmaobriencoach. And then I have my Lemons and Pineapples podcast, which Talana, you've also guested on as well. So you can come and find me and listen to me ramble about all sorts of things on there.
And it's wonderful ramblings. I mean, that's where I came across the bit about, learn so much more about procrastination. I'll have all those links in the show notes as well, down below. So just some rapid fire questions just for fun as we come to the end here. What comes to mind when I say failure?
Learning.
What is your secret weapon for bouncing back from a setback?
Self-reflection and sometimes just pulling a bit of a gap and walking away for a little while.
What's the most important lesson you've learned as an entrepreneur?
Back up your data.
I'm going to back up as soon as we finish this.
I know, I've just put the fear of God into everybody listening to this now.
What's the best advice you've ever received as an entrepreneur?
Teach what you want to learn. And I think is great advice. And also the most powerful way you can show up is exactly as you are. You are your own secret weapon.
Yeah. 3 cheers for authenticity.
Exactly.
What inspires you to get out of bed in the morning?
I think knowing that I'm creating a business and that I'm doing work that makes a big difference for people, knowing that I'm helping people get out of a place where they perhaps don't want to, well, they don't want to be, otherwise you wouldn't be hiring me, but helping people get out of a space of being stuck and helping them create something better for themselves. I think that's really why I bounce out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. So great, Emma. If we were to just end off then with your last piece of advice or tip around for that person who's listening,
Mm-hmm.
who really is riddled with fear of failure and is just not taking that next step, whether it's in their career or starting a business or a
Mm-hmm.
creative endeavor,
Mm-hmm.
what would be your parting thought for them?
So I think it is, if you're sitting in a place of you're stuck, is to think about, why do I want this? And you might answer that question and the answer might be, I actually don't really want it, which might be why you're not doing it. But if it is something that you really, really want, two things is, what is the cost of never going for it? Am I prepared to live the rest of my life not taking a chance on this? Can I live with that? And if the answer is no, what is the smallest, tiniest first step you can take today after listening to this podcast that is going to move you one tiny step out of where you are towards where it is you want to go?
Yes. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
No way.
This has been Risk and Rise with me, Talana Simpson. I hope you've enjoyed learning from Emma as much as I have, and that you'll take that advice that she's given us and just go. Now, what is the one small next step that you can do that will take your whole life forward in whatever way it is that is a high priority for you? It is amazing when you just can identify that one small next step and muster up the courage and just take it. Just step forward, because I promise you from experience, it does get easier. That step helps lead to the next one and builds that courage and capacity and confidence. So let's go and do that now. Take our one next step as we risk and rise together. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining me on Risk and Rise, where we face fears, conquer challenges, and rise above adversity to achieve our dreams. Find out more at riskandrise.co.za.